in our art schools now, you'll find very few people painting, not just with commitment or enthusiasm, but with passion. And no one can accuse Peter of not having passion. Passion is an expression of love. It's part of our capacity to love. And what Peter is doing is causing us to focus our attention on aspects of being human, which sometimes we'd rather ignore. Now, I have presented over 3,000 exhibitions, many of them part of the official Edinburgh Festival, God knows how many on the Fringe, and I don't know how many in other situations in other countries. I've come across the studios of many people at work, and one of my favorite artists that I must introduce to Peter is a man who's been celebrated this year, I think in September, with a massive building dedicated to his life and his work. And I'm sure that, that Peter will find him interesting. He was not just a painter, but he was a man of theatre. And here we have a man of theatre talking about painting. This doesn't happen very often because our educational system separates people trained to be actors or theatre directors from the world of people trained to be involved in the visual arts. Very rarely do they come together. But I would like Peter to meet, although he's dead, great artists, for me, have the knack of not dying. I think it's only a rumor that certain of the great artists I've had the privilege of working with are dead. They're not. They're with me practically every second of my life. They weigh heavily on my shoulders. And I know that Peter will respect the fact that there is a building being dedicated to a man who spent most of his life painting, and then decided that painting was not enough. He had to express his concern for the human condition through theatre. So I am now thinking, what a strange situation we're in now. How do you follow that film? Well, it causes me to feel totally inadequate and conscious of the fact that my words will probably be incapable of giving you the idea that I'm trying to explain to Peter that I have a moral responsibility to introduce him to someone that I don't think he has worked with. I'm referring to someone called Tadeusz Kantor, who spent most of his life in the Jewish ghetto of Krakow. You probably know the film Schindler's List. That was about that particular part of the world. And I feel that somehow or another, the experience that this man had, living and working under the heel of the Gestapo and the madness of Hitler's Germany, caused him to paint with a kind of passion, which is, to a degree, missing in what we consider as art nowadays. I'm looking at Peter now, involved in this extraordinary business of trying to define the essence of my reality. And you'll notice he doesn't really need to look at me still, motionless. He's even inviting me to move closer. And I am amazed, you see, because of the skill of the man, to see how he is already interpreting the reality of myself in a way that only an artist can, by adding some kind of viewpoint that I myself am incapable of having. He is interpreting the mystery of my being here. Now, Stephen Berkoff does that through his acting. He inhabits the characters of certain people. He even writes plays. And you might think that's a separate thing from the business of an artist making a statement on a piece of paper. But I don't think so. I think that what's happening here is something which is going to teach me something and teach you all something. You're actually seeing the act of creation. He's using a piece of, well, I suppose a kind of pencil and an ordinary piece of paper, and he's transforming it. And he is doing that conscious of the fact that he's got to deal with the mystery of my life. My life is a mystery to me because I'm now no longer living life with that kind of vigor that I had when I was in my 70s. When you're in your 70s, you're quite young, you know that, despite the fact that in your 70s, you have to admit that you're playing the game of life in extra time. So you've got to have the ball at your feet. You can't allow the vast crowd of your enemies to have the ball, and you can't allow them to win. Because Peter knows full well, as every great artist knows, that life is a real battlefield. So what's going on here is something very extraordinary, and I am looking at it as you are looking at it. It's never happened before in the whole history of the Edinburgh Festival. This is a one-off. I've waited for 68 festivals for this to happen. It's full-blooded theatre in a building that's not built for the purpose of having art happen inside it. This is a dissection room, and I like the fact that the word dissection comes into play, because I'm seeing someone that I respect who doesn't belong to today's art world. He doesn't fit neatly into it, and he's not part of this great exhibition which is dominating Edinburgh called Generation, because somehow or another he's not included. He should be. He's got the right qualifications. He's not 84, as I am. And this generation is the last 25 years. And over the last 25 years, he's been doing so many things, including involving himself in the horror of Bosnia when all hell broke loose. I think what we're looking at now, and I'm going to photograph him because I don't have the time to draw him, but I think I'm going to photograph him, and I'm going to make a close-up of that, because I believe that that photograph I've just taken is a manifestation of something called the act of creativity. I stand behind him now thinking how he is now drawing me from his knowledge of me, not now, but through all the years that I've known him. And all great portraits are about that. And a photograph can't tell you that, because he is taking into account the mystery of the passing of time. I'm a different human being from the one that sat there so many minutes ago. Something else has happened. And the great portrait painter, the great painter like Rembrandt like Van Gogh, is taking into account the passing of time. If you look at Van Gogh's paintings, you'll see how he revealed something about being human, and that he'd probably taken seriously that other Dutchman, Rembrandt. Some of the greatest things that ever happened in human history are Rembrandt's taking time out to paint his self-portraits. Art students now are not told, come along now and look at a Rembrandt painting. They're not asked to do that. If they looked, they would be horrified. Because Rembrandt was running in a race which you don't expect human beings to be capable of running in. He was running against time, and you can see the late portraits show the process of aging. I mean, I don't think he lived to be 84. It's a terrifying thought that a human being can do so, because in doing so, you're conscious of all the human beings you've ever known, who you carry with you, and won't let you go. And what you're seeing here is an extraordinary attempt by an extraordinary artist to define the mystery of another human being. All human beings are at the very heart and center of creation. There's a poem I'm now going to quote rather badly for you. It's only 4 lines, but I can't quite get it into my mind. But it more or less sums up the art of Peter Howson and Steve Berkoff, and the artist that Steve asked us to think about. It's a poem written by Hugh MacDiarmid, and it's the one poem that might suggest that he had a great gift. And his great gift was about his capacity to love. Because that's what art is about. It's the language we use if we want to express our capacity to love. Not to be clever, not to show our fancy footwork and our talent, but our capacity to love. And this has nothing to do with winning a 5-star accolade from the Edinburgh Festival, because for 40 years of the Edinburgh Festival, there were no 5 stars. Nobody got any prizes. And it wasn't about aspiring through the arts to become a celebrity or to become rich. I know the world's gone bonkers, and I know everything is... the rules of the game are the same rules as apply to Hollywood, and these poor, pathetic people having to hold that ghastly object called an Oscar. It's about everything turned into a competition. And with all competitions, we're asked to make heroes of those who win and take our attention away from those who lose. He is actually painting the portrait of a loser. Because in the end, when you're 84, you know that you've lost. No matter how you try, even if you are Van Gogh, even if you are Mozart, even if you are Rembrandt, you're going to end up losing. And that is not the message of this year's Edinburgh Festival. This year's Edinburgh Festival is about all those people who actually are supposedly successful. I hate the word, because we're not born to be successful. We're born, I think there's a very wonderful word, a New York word, Jewish word. We're born to be schmucks and to reveal our inadequacies. I think this portrait is a portrait of a human being suffering from his inadequacies. I daren't look at it. because it might tell me something about myself that I don't want to know about. But it's the job of a great artist to do that. To question something, for example, which is unstomachable. If you want to really do something distasteful, then turn the world of art into the world of entertainment. That's why you've got over 1,000 poor devils known as stand-up comics who are not really here. They're only using this place to be somewhere else, probably London television, the world, I don't know. But these people can't deal with the problem of failure. They're not allowed to fail. They must cause you to laugh, probably once every 3 seconds, or maybe 4 or 5 seconds, but if you're not laughing, they're failing. He's not there to make you laugh. He's there to consider what the Greeks knew was all important, and that is to cry. And the poem is as follows. The poem is, Mars, oh, by the way, is in broad Scots, so you might not understand it, all of you who are Sassenachs. Mars is braw in Cramisay. Venus also in her green silk gown. The stars are ween o' bletherers, but earth, ye bonny brookit bairn, greet een tear, and ye'll droon the hale clamjamfrey. So in all the universe, for God's sake, I've got to tell these bloody scientists this. There is only one planet where you'll find something so precious, so remarkable, that you can't find it anywhere. In the moon, in the stars, in the galaxies. You cannot find that one precious thing. Perhaps more important than laughter is the human tear. And what is this artist doing? He's revealing through this portrait the capacity of a human being to cry a bitter tear, to feel the problem, the pain of being human. Yes, I guess I'm looking at a human being who's probably around the age of 84 and therefore playing the game of life in penalty shootout time. And knowing that I've only got so many, whatever it is, minutes, years left, so that I don't waste my time. So I'm grateful to everyone who set this up. I didn't expect it. It's a big surprise. I didn't expect this to happen. And I know that this is a very Christian man, a very religious spirit, and he is trying to cope with the legacy that he's taken on of the genius of Dante Alighieri, who is questionably more important than Shakespeare and one of the greatest artists who ever lived. He's also taking into account the world of Shakespeare, King Lear. He might also be taking into account the genius of Mozart in writing that extraordinary passion, the Requiem. Something has happened here that cannot be positioned neatly into the world of children's art or theatre or dance or all these nonsensical definitions, which all add up to the experience of the Edinburgh Festival. At the end, it'll be considered a great success because it's the biggest ever. And more money went into the coffers of the Edinburgh citizens. It's disgusting. I've been asked in the last few days, oh, by the way, did anybody have any difficulty in understanding what that poem is about? I'll translate it now. Mars is beautiful in crimson. Venus, also in her green silk gown. The stars, a vast crowd of chatterers, you can hear them. But Earth, you beautiful little urchin. Can you see them in Glasgow? Joan Erdley painted them with their tears running down their dirty faces. Cry one tear, and you'll drown the whole thing. Do we understand that? Is that part of our education? Do we understand that? Now, I don't know when he became an artist, but I've got a funny feeling that he's always been someone that we dare to call an artist. And an 8-year-old child asked me a question the other day. The 8-year-old child said, "Excuse me, sir, how old do you have to be to become an artist?" You can't become an artist until you go to Glasgow School of Art and you then get a piece of paper saying you're a master of fine art. What a nonsense. I think we're all born to be artists. We're all born to be creative in some way or another. And if we're not defined as that, then we have to be defined as part of suffering humanity. And that means we probably are doing things that we don't want to do to earn our daily bread. And we've therefore got to put all our energy into being spectators. I'm thinking of the vast crowds of people. I don't know how much money is going to be made by the new football season in Britain. The vast numbers of people sitting, watching people kicking a ball. The obscenity of knowing that every time somebody walks on a pitch, they're valued in millions. It's nonsense. It's immoral. It's wrong. And in the face of that human being, I can see that. Now, can I live up to that portrait? Can I reveal to you what it's like to have experienced 68 Edinburgh festivals? I don't compare this festival as a success according to whoever is going to get a Scotsman Award. Okay? I don't consider it necessary for me to do that. I know that I'm going to compare it to the first festival I ever experienced. And the highlight of that, you won't believe this, the highlight of that was the experience of listening to the music, sublime beyond belief, created by the world's greatest orchestra, which hadn't played for nearly 6 years because Hitler had forbade it to play. So they came together, these German-speaking musicians. I should really tell Steve about this. And under the baton of one of the world's greatest conductors, Bruno Walter, I think I'm not listening to, I can still hear it. I was only 17. They performed the sublime music of Germany. Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms. And remember, everything German was a dirty word. If you wanted to swear, you simply said German. And this was 1947. So I've got a right to talk to you about this because I don't think anybody else is going to do it. How can you compare? That was a moment of pure history. And Edinburgh was fortunate to be the one city chosen to give all these musicians the chance to think that there was a future for them. Now, why was the Edinburgh Festival brought into being? It was the brainchild of a German-speaking Austrian Jew. Can you tell me his name? Come on. Who was the first director of the Edinburgh Festival? Rudolf, that doesn't sound Scottish, does it? Rudolf Bing. Right. If we forget him for a minute, and if we forget why he wanted the festival to come into being, why? Because he wanted people to come here and become famous? To receive prizes? No. His idea of the festival was that the language of love, the language which ascends to the condition of prayer, had to be used. In 1947, 2 years after the war ended, 2 years before we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and whatever, he said, we have to heal the wounds of war. It was necessary because people were suffering in a way you can't imagine. Of course, Edinburgh was intolerable, like every city, because there was no food, no clothes. You had to have coupons to buy food, clothes. It was a grey city, and this human being was 17. I've stood like a sentinel over every single Edinburgh Festival because I've thought it was my moral responsibility, because no city deserved something like this. Now we've forgotten. Now we've forgotten that that was the reason for the festival coming to being. So there's no need for prizes. There was also, for me, in that moment, the joy of knowing I was in Europe, that Edinburgh was no longer limited to being in Scotland. Because for the first time in my life, age 17, I heard the sound of a foreign language. It was French. I'd never heard French. I'd heard my French master attempting to speak French, but he had difficulty, and I didn't think it was a very decent language until I heard the genius of the Comédie Française performing Molière's L'École des Femmes, a work of genius. And Louis Jouvet was the greatest exponent of that. So I'm asking you all to consider what the hell are we doing now to compare to these great moments. And he was from a country which had suffered from the invasion of Hitler's army. This was happening in Edinburgh. Can you believe it? So I'm comparing to what's happening now and thinking, for God's sake. Now, in these days, everything would be really a kind of one-off. You wouldn't hear the music of the Vienna Philharmonic playing for the first time anywhere else but in Edinburgh. No point going to New York. You weren't going to hear it there, or London. And this was the kind of festival where you would ask somebody to write a play in blank verse. If you want to commit suicide in terms of getting an audience, do that. Especially if you ask someone who's a poet. T.S. Eliot. And he, like Peter, wrote something for us to consider. It was called The Wasteland, because the war had caused Europe to look like a wasteland. Europe then was so horrific, you could hardly imagine it. So how did the Edinburgh Festival come into being? I think if you need artists to tell the truth as he is now, as Peter is, you better choose the right kind of artist. And I'm grateful to those who have set up this extraordinary event that this has come into being. I don't suppose the National Portrait Gallery will be able to put this portrait anywhere on their walls. It's too much, don't you think? Don't you think? What's the difference between this portrait and the portraits of all the worthies of the Enlightenment painted by Rayburn? Ask yourself that question. Have you all been to the National Portrait Gallery? You should go, because there's another painter who, in a way, is like Peter. His name is John Byrne. Oh, John Byrne's not in this generation exhibition either. Some kind of chancer, some kind of expert, probably under the age of 40, has decided that the only valuable artists are the ones who've appeared in the last 25 years. It's nonsense. And the reason why this is so important is that Peter is a defender of truth. Because, in the end, all culture, all art is a manifestation of beauty. In a funny kind of way, that's beautiful, isn't it? It's astounding you with the quality of its beauty. I cannot thank Peter enough. I've just observed something which I can't believe has happened. And he didn't use a camera, a selfie, or whatever. He did something quite frightening. And I think I have to be grateful to him, and so must you. And if you're going to move from this place and tell your friends what happened, you're going to find difficulty. Because it's not like anything that's ever happened before. And in a way, he's been involved in reminding us why the Edinburgh Festival came into being. Joseph Boyce, like Cantor, suffered greatly. Boyce survived the war with terrible wounds. Half his skull had gone, one lung remained. And he told me, always remember, if you're going to make art, don't be afraid to show your wounds, your weakness. Don't be afraid to show that aspect of who you are, which is defined not by laughter, but by your capacity to shed a bitter tear. And so I'm grateful to him. I'm amazed. He's remembering all the times we'd ever met, and he's putting that all together, and you've been witness of something that no one has ever experienced before. I wish Steve Burkhoff had been here. It might have reassured him. That, as long as Peter lives, he is the man who can tell the truth. Keats said, truth is beauty, and beauty is truth. That's all you've got to focus on. And I wish I could have Alex Salmon here and Arthur Darling, because I'm very conscious of the fact these young men, I mean, obviously if you're 84, you regard them as very young, have got to say something about the future of Scotland, which is a part of Europe, part of something called Britain. They've got to say something in a very strange setup, where they haven't invited Peter Howson to be involved. He needs to be involved the next time they meet. And I have just been, if you watch television tonight, you'll notice that BBC have asked me to help them. I'm suggesting they should speak with a piece of art which is in the form of a cabinet specially made called the Referendum Cabinet. And it has images of the two sides of the issue. One defining the reality of Scotland, and the other defining not England, but the reality of that other country which exists down there. I think it's called London. It's not England, it's London. It's not Yorkshire, it's not the Lake District, it's called London. And the images are so beautiful that you must watch it on television. I think it's on BBC News. It's nothing to do with these culture programs that, you know, tell you that there's something called the Edinburgh Festival on. And I think he's needed. He should do a portrait of both of them. I think we should suggest that when they meet again, because they are locked in a discussion which might call into question our understanding of who we are. Now, the Edinburgh Festival has given more to Scotland than any country on the planet. No city has ever deserved it, no country has ever deserved it. But what kind of festival? I think the image of the Edinburgh Festival is what it does to each and every one of us to reveal the truth of who we are. And I think what you've actually got here is the truth of a human being trying to deal with the business of being without most of his friends. I think 80% of my friends have died. 80% are no longer physically here with their memories to help me deal with telling the truth. And the truth is obscured. I could see the pain in Steve Berkoff's face. He knows that something is wrong, and he's old enough to know that there's a way out, and he's put his hopes on this extraordinary man. I can't believe it's happening still. He's adding the finishing touches. And I'm going to ask him now, how seriously does he take Dante, Robert Burns, Shakespeare? Oh, by the way, this is the 450th anniversary of Shakespeare's birth. It's the 200th anniversary of the birth of Lermontov, the great Russian poet. It's a great year. Not that you're going to find us caring about Shakespeare at this festival, because we've got our eyes on other things. I ask you all now to look at that, because I think it's more or less signature time. Look. And he's probably going to put the date. And where do you place this experience? Thank God it's given me hope, because I now identify it with the 68th Edinburgh Festival. And if we could learn from this, so many days short of the referendum. And I'd just like to say... So, you said at the beginning, it didn't really matter that I was sitting in front of you, that you wanted to catch basically the essence of my presence. You've been aware of me, I suppose, as a friend, as someone who cares about your life and your suffering as a human being. Because when I think of you having more than your fair share of human suffering. I think of you as a survivor, and I think of you as someone who has the capacity to celebrate through your art the business of being alive. And that means the whole story, the tears and the laughter, the smiles, the whole thing. I would be scared to death if I met that person that you've just made real. And Terry is conscious of the fact.
I'll just say something. I wanted to just thank everyone for coming along today. It's been great fun. I was very nervous, so forgive me if I haven't done the most profound of pieces. It's okay as a study, I think, but it's really great to see so many people here. And Richard here is a man of, what age are you now?
I think, 84.
84, well,
so that means I can't really remember my 70s. No, I certainly can't remember my 60s.
I think you look fantastic for your age, and it's quite difficult to draw you, actually. It is difficult because your face does have a quality that's difficult to capture. Maybe try again at some point. We can
I'd
do
like
that,
to try again.
Yeah. But it was great fun. And we could talk about Dante and Robert Burns and all the rest.
Who are your other favourite human beings who are on your shoulders every minute of your life?
Oh my goodness. Goya, Dante. Well, I think Dante's... Goya, but Dante is the greatest, I think, of all.
Why is he the greatest of all?
Because he encompassed everything. I mean, I love Shakespeare, but Dante for me is greater, probably, than Shakespeare. Michelangelo,
of course,
especially. Goya, especially. Blake, especially.
Blake, yes.
I mean, the problem, I think, today is that we don't have really that many people who I would call great. And I think, I mean, this could go on forever, but I better stop in a minute. I'm just going to say my piece here that as a society, we are becoming more and more decadent. And I think that Western society, Western civilization is in trouble. And I think unless we can do something about it and become more true to ourselves, then we are going to collapse at some point. From what I can see in my travels, the great painters are now coming from the Middle East and the Far East, and we cannot paint anymore. We cannot draw anymore. So that's it in a nutshell, I think. We're in trouble.
I want you to know that I have a little, well, that's a sign of hope from something miraculous called Room 13. And in response to that question put to me by an 8-year-old child, when does a human being become an artist? I've discovered that in a housing estate with the usual problem of drugs and unemployment in a suburb of somewhere you can hardly call a beautiful place to live. It's set in the most exquisite landscape probably in the world, but it's called Fort William. And in the primary school of Fort William, within sight of Ben Nevis and the huge impact that has on anybody's life, there is an experiment in the use of visual art that is affecting now. It's so successful. It's called Room 13, and there are now 6 Room 13s in Soweto. And it's based on the idea...
I don't know anything about that.
I'm going to have to send you information, Peter, because I can't go on speaking like this without you knowing about Room 13. And the kids there, the oldest, well, the ones that are seniors are about 12. There's a manager who's 12. There's a librarian who's 12. There's a director who's 12. No teacher is allowed in the room. And they do not mention examinations.
That's good.
Because you can't examine art.
No.
You can't give art a star, 5 stars or whatever. It's something beyond that. I wouldn't ever define your work in terms of a star, but I do equate it with the extraordinary capacity of some of these young people, and I don't refer to them as the makers of children's art. They're not. The outstanding work was made by an artist, age 11, on the basis that she watched it happen for real on her granny's sofa, the collapse of the Twin Towers. And it affected her so deeply that she made a painting which she wanted to consider as capable of making people cry and feel remorse and somehow identify themselves with that terrible tragedy. She was 11. Can I just say to you all, I don't separate what Peter has done from that 11-year-old child. She did it 20 years ago. She's now a 30-year-old human being, and she is, for me, someone who proves, if it hadn't been for Room 13, she wouldn't have done it. So I've got to tell you all about Room 13. And I don't know what I've been talking about now, because if you consider Peter, you don't fit him into the neat rules and regulations of the art world. I must ask you one thing. What is it that you are concentrating on now that gives you...
Well, right now, I'm not, you're right, I'm not involved in the art world at all. I'm doing a big commission for a collector abroad of 36 massive biblical paintings. So it's, I've done about 6, I think, so far. See, I've been ill for a long, long time. I think I've been ill for about 6 years. I just got myself better a few months ago.
You look terrific.
And I don't remember doing the first paintings, actually. I've done 6 so far. I don't remember doing them.
Where are they going to be placed?
We're about in a museum somewhere, but I can't really tell you where it is.
Give me the titles of the 6 you've done.
I've done Job. That was the first
Job.
one. Yeah. I've done David and Bathsheba. I've done Moses. Done the crucifixion, Jesus. I've done the Transfiguration. I'm doing the Transfiguration right now. And I've done Solomon and his wives. Now, there was 700 of them.
You've taken on yourself an enormous...
And as my daughter said, 300 porcupines. So it's, he had 700 wives, 300 concubines. I managed to cram in 130 wives into the paintings. So there's a lot of figures in it.
You can all imagine that Peter is involved in a serious business, and it doesn't fit in to what you expect to find in the usual kind of National Gallery or Civic Gallery or even the Edinburgh Festival. I think this is too big for the Edinburgh Festival. But thank God this person came along and asked you to do it.
Yep, I'm very pleased. I love my work. I mean, I love it. When I'm not working, I'm up to mischief, and that's why I've got to keep on working. And,
so if you are not doing what you're doing now, where is that one going to end up?
That's in your collection.
Oh, that's
That's a gift.
So if I dare to show that as who I am, I'm going to scare even more members of Creative Scotland and the people who run the galleries, because they won't want to deal with someone like that. And I want you to know, I am deeply touched that you have done that.
It's a great pleasure, Ricky.
And I just want to ask you one other thing. Have you ever thought of yourself as a Scottish artist or as just simply an artist?
Well, yeah, I think of myself more as Scottish than English, even though I was born in England. I came up to Scotland when I was about 3. I see myself Scottish and kind of Northern European, but I don't really, I'm not patriotic really. I'm not in any way, I don't see myself as being any one religion or anything like that. I mean, I see myself as a Christian, but I still want to encompass everyone. I mean, I'm not, I would hate to be narrow about these things, you know, so I love people, and I love especially people on the edge. I mean, that's why I hang about with Dossers in Glasgow, and it's the
Dossers like and the tramps and the people sitting on the pavements everywhere you move.
Well, I find, I mean, this is to me, the absolute truth is that a lot of these people are closer to truth and heaven than the suburban person that doesn't even think about goodness or truth, or the fact that we're as a society, we contribute to so much destruction in the world, you know, and I don't think we should pay our taxes and all that kind of stuff for building Trident and all the rest of it, but that could end, this could take forever to discuss all that, because I feel so strongly about these things now. You know, I've been to the Middle East, I've been to Bosnia, I've seen horror, death, destruction, whatever, and it's, you know, we're so far away from that here, but our soldiers are going over there and dying in wars that we don't know what we're fighting. You know,
I know, and it's totally unnecessary.
Anyway, I think we should stop there, because otherwise...
Can I just say thank you? Thank you.